Oh, well, I just had one question,
No, go.
real quick. You mentioned you're a capitalist,
Mhm.
and I was just wondering, as a capitalist, what you think about subsidies for energies and why you think that nuclear could be so cost effective, and what's stopping nuclear from being competitive with fossils.
So I'm a capitalist, and that means that I also support no subsidies.
Yeah.
Like I also support letting the market go the way it would. But that completely throws out a couple of things. That throws out that the market is already subsidized, and that throws out the future clean, green, like clean energy concept, okay? Because even though I'm a capitalist and money in my pocket is like, I'm sorry, it's always going to drive me. That's why I have this job. I don't come here. I love the nuclear technology, but I would probably be, doing something at home, to push nuclear technology differently if I didn't have to get a paycheck every day. You know what I mean? The subsidies that we are asking for or we are looking for are to level the playing field. Because currently, right now, I don't see it as a level playing field. Capitalists always look at putting everything to the drop-down bottom base field that everybody is treated the exact same and letting the market factors push everything itself. Well, if I've got a whole segment that's already got a step up on me, and there's no way I'm ever going to convince Congress that a wind subsidy is bad, you know what I mean? There's no way I'm ever going to convince them that a solar subsidy is bad. Then we need to come up with something else that helps us compete on an equal footing. I don't want to be subsidized to be better or to have more opportunity than anybody else. I just want to be subsidized so it's fair.
So the industries that are currently subsidized are the green energies.
Yes.
Sorry,
Yeah.
the renewables.
No, the renewables, yeah. Now, there are some fossil fuels that receive some subsidies. Depends on, how you're doing it or where you're doing it, clean coal subsidies and all sorts of stuff like that. But the majority of the subsidies out there are going to the renewables. Now, if you look at the grid the way it is, we generate some of the cheapest natural gas in the world right now. Okay, it's super, super cheap. So what should we be doing with that rather than flooding our market with cheap natural gas? We should be selling it overseas and making even more money and using that additional money to reinvest in our infrastructure, in ourselves here. Because then you could use that additional money to build these nuclear power plants or these more renewable concepts that cost more but have the green aspects that you're looking for. Okay? We also need to be conscious of the fact that we're not just America. It's the whole world in this right now at this point. You know what I mean? And I can't sit here and say it's wrong for Nigeria or Guyana to build coal power natural gas plants right now. Because I can't say we did it when we were getting our revolution and industrializing and everything like that. These poorer countries should be allowed to industrialize as quickly as humanly possible so that they can then get to a point where they can start having these conversations about clean, green, those sort of things. But up until that point, there are people in those countries that have no access to clean water, no access to electricity, no access to living conditions that we would find atrocious. So we should be doing something in our country to force us to be looking towards more of those green options that are perhaps more expensive so that we can then balance out the impact happening globally. Because we're not, you're no longer just one nation in this game anymore. So, I said I'm a capitalist, but, and then I talk about subsidies and I completely, destroy my entire argument. But the energy and clean, no, but you're right. Because we have this argument all the time amongst, when a bunch of us nukes get together and we have an advocacy panel at a meeting or a conference or stuff like that. This stuff always comes up. I'd love for there to be no subsidies and for all of that subsidy money to be used for research and development, for the government to throw the money towards developing new technology, developing cheaper technology, developing cheaper renewables. But I don't see that happening. The amount of money that's been spent by the federal government on the research of new nuclear technologies or building nuclear prototypes, if you compared that to the research money spent in renewables or even fossil fuels, you would be shocked, okay? Because there's tons more money going everywhere else than there is going to nuclear. And that's not to say that we don't have some subsidies and don't get some money now, because there's tons of people doing work at national labs that are, funded by federal government grants and doing things like that. But in my opinion, the clean energy subsidy that was put out by New York is the first true commercial nuclear energy subsidy. And the whole purpose of it, behind it, was not to make nuclear competitive forever, because eventually I think they want to take the subsidy away. It's to be a stopgap to prevent unreal market influences and pressures from causing that plant to shut down.
Okay, I guess what I'm struggling to understand is why nuclear needs a subsidy. If the research is there, what is it about nuclear that's not competitive with fossil? Why is it so much more expensive to operate?
Our regulation.
The regulation.
Yeah, we're about to spend $1.5 billion just before we even put the first shovel to ground. Okay, so you're talking about that burden on a company that has now said, boom, and we're working to build a consortium right now. If you don't believe that my company is interested in pushing that cost down to our customer, then we truly need to have another capitalist discussion here. But we are so overly regulated, and so there's a thing going on right now that's called Delivering the Nuclear Promise. Okay, and it's an initiative by the utilities, all nuclear utilities in the country. They meet together, they get together every year. It's there's this thing called NSIAC, which is the meeting of all the executives in nuclear from all the utilities around the country. And a couple of years ago, they said, we see the finances, we see what's going on, this is the future, we are going to institute DNP, Delivering the Nuclear Promise. Delivering the Nuclear Promise is across the board a 30% cost reduction in nuclear power plant operations. Okay, so they are looking at everything, and they are trying to say, how can we cut costs? Now, whenever I go to a DNP presentation, I do a lot of conferences and stuff like that, so I see a lot of these presentations. I've seen a lot of DNP presentations where they talk about, we're going to do, efficiency bulletins where one, plant figures something out, and then we're going to spread it out to the rest of the fleet, and it'll increase your efficiency. Maybe it saves 0.01% cost at this plant, another 2%. Spread it all around, save some more money. But they also show their structure. And if you look at a quality assurance organization for a nuclear power plant that really hasn't changed in 20 or 30 years, if you look at the structure of that quality assurance organization 20 years ago, it might have been 30 people. Now, at the nuclear power plant, that same organization chart for quality assurance might have 140 people in it, because they just kept adding more and more and more and more requirements onto themselves. We have this thing called every nuclear organization, company, anything in the world has what is called a corrective action program. So it's for any employee like myself to go into the system, log a report and say, I think this is a situation adverse to safety or adverse to quality, or this is why this analysis was done incorrectly, or this is what was not considered in this analysis, and so on and so forth, okay? So that's a very powerful tool. It goes straight up the chain of command. It'll get assigned to executives who will push it down to managers who will be like, this needs to be resolved, or they'll throw it away and say, no, this is a non-issue. How does all that happen? Well, you have a pre-corrective action review board meeting where they go, then you have a corrective action review board meeting, then you have a post-corrective action review board meeting, then you might have a post-CARB follow-up, then you might have an individual root cause analysis for the specific corrective action, then you might assign a team of 5 or 6 engineers to perform the root cause analysis. Then you might assign an additional team of 5 or 6 engineers to perform the solution put forth in the root cause analysis. And oh wait, 2 years later we might meet again with everybody to now go over all this. And oh, by the way, in the interim, 3 guys have filed more corrective actions on the same process. Okay, so
By the time you replace a screw, you've got a 30-page report.
essentially. And we would like, now some level of that is necessary and important, but the chaff is what they're trying to determine right now. Because it was just like, oh, as the years went on, we were so concerned about, maintaining the perspective of quality and safety that we just put layers and layers and layers and layers and layers and layers onto ourselves. I mean, I'm sure she's not old enough to remember, but I'm sure you remember the it'll be too cheap to meter. Nuclear power will be too cheap to meter, and all that stuff. That could have been the case had we not had the accidents, not had the issues, had we been treated, more like other industries in the world that have similar danger or safety impacts, but instead we were put under the microscope and really, really looked at, because it was a vast misconception. No nuclear power plant could ever blow up like a nuclear bomb, and that is the initial thought that most people have. I don't want this in my backyard. I don't want this here because I'll see the mushroom cloud in 5 or 6 days. And I can't tell you how many TV shows I watch, that I, love and you've been following for years. And then all of a sudden I want to beat my head to death because somebody hijacked the nuclear power grid in the country and is going to make every plant melt down and they're going to kill 90% of the American population. It's just misconception.